Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more stories. In this video, a company built a ridiculous amount of solar panels on my vacant property without my permission. Here is how I dealt with them. So my grandfather owned a large farmland in Colombia and even sold off a lot of livestock and some acres so that me and my sisters could go to college and not need to worry about the expense. And by the way, Ripe stars, this story was originally in Spanish and it was translated by Google Translate into English, so my apologies if some sentences sound weird. Anyway, when he passed away, that land ended up getting divided amongst the family, which might sound like we all got a small amount, but it was actually more than enough for any of us. At the time, I was working under a contract and couldn't just drop everything to deal with the land. I was not planning on selling it, but instead building some homes on the property I could rent out, as I knew my sisters had similar plans. We were not gonna move back to Colombia or start a farm, but at the same time wanted the land he left to us. I did go down for the funeral, and to see the property, which was expensive and empty, I went home planning to finish my work contract before taking time off to go down and get the houses built. Picking up some work I could do from home in the meantime, I got back down there to find that my area of land had been transformed into a solar panel farm. I did not give anybody permission to do this and was shocked at the sea of giant solar panels covering my property. It was not hard for me to contact the company, since their name was plastered all over the things. What was hard though was getting the phone number for the owner of it in order to talk to him about the property. I did manage to get in contact with him, and he told me that he had a verbal contract with the owner of the property, dropping a name that I'd never heard of before. It was not even my grandpa's name where he could pretend the old owner did it. I told him that it wasn't true and I was the real owner and wanted my property back since they built on it illegally. He refused to remove the panels and even turn it around, trying to make me feel guilty, claiming that I must hate clean energy or poor people being able to get power. Like, I'm all for clean and renewable energy, but not a company building it on my property without permission. I had to get a lawyer to take legal action against them because it was clear that it was the only thing they were gonna understand. I had to collect everything and get it together so that once we went to court they couldn't try to pull anything. All my documents showing that I owned the property. I even had an email from the company owner again claiming that he had a verbal agreement and dropped the random name I never heard of. I made sure to save that because it was going to be some of my biggest evidence against them. I took photos of the solar panel farm to show how expensive it was and that it was covering my entire property. Instead of focusing on some type of defense or admitting they did something wrong, they just filed a countersuit against me for breach of contract. It was gonna be very interesting when we finally got in front of a judge and you could see all of the crap that this company was trying to pull. It took time to wait for a trial, and I was forced to hang around in Colombia until that happened, staying with other family members who told me that what was happening to me was not so strange. These big companies had been more commonly coming into rural areas and trying to steal land. A lot of time being successful because people were too poor to sue them or didn't know that they could actually do anything about it. Taking advantage of people and getting to steal their land. That was not gonna happen to me though, and it just made me angry and more determined to defeat them. Finally, we got to court and I presented everything I had to them. The part where I had to prove that it was my legal property and the solar panels belonged to the company was easy. The harder part was when the company was claiming that they had a verbal contract to use my property. That was when the text message I had saved came into place and my lawyer jumped into action. My lawyer, every time my client tried to speak to the company owner, he was insistent that there was a verbal contract. When pushing further, he revealed the name of the person that he made this deal with, and that person was not my client. I don't know if he really had a verbal agreement with somebody, but it was not the owner. They were trying to argue weakly that it would still somehow be considered a breach of contract on my part since they insisted they had permission from the man they assumed was the owner. However, even in Colombia, liability does not work that way, and they got chewed out from the judge when they tried to make that argument. It fell on the company to make sure that the deal they were making was with the actual property owner. Plus, they acted in bad faith by not doing their due diligence to fact-check anything they were being told, plus that they never got a written contract or had a bank transaction showing that they were paying to use the property made the entire thing even more fishy. Their countersuit was thrown out and the judge ruled in my favor. He ordered the company to remove the solar panels despite them getting whiny about it and claiming they were needed and important. On top of that, they were going to need to pay me a nice sum of money for a few reasons. The first being basically rent for using my land the entire time they were doing it, the second being expenses and damages caused by their antics. It didn't end there, because the company was now on the radar of the court system and found to have been putting solar panels on 3 other properties that they did not have any ownership of or proof of rental or anything. They were forced to take down even more and issued a public apology for using private land to their advantage. I'm sure that it didn't end there, and my guess is the next step was a big fat audit to see what other illegal things they had going on under their belt. I obviously was not part of any of that and just happy that I had my land back, and now some good seed money to start building homes and properly renting out the property and land. Once I do it, I'm gonna make sure that the people living there know that if anybody else comes claiming to own the property, to tell me, and I will come and take care of it. A known scam that I'll make sure I won't fall victim to again. And the next one is an Am I the Jerk story. It is titled, Am I the a-hole for refusing to help my wife and her friend anymore over what my wife calls a miscommunication? My wife Emily has a longtime friend Leslie who has recently become a single mother. Leslie does not have a working vehicle at the moment and is working 2 jobs, so Emily took it upon herself to help Leslie out as much as she can. Emily had started asking me to help as well in driving Leslie and her kids around, taking them to school appointments, taking Leslie to the grocery store, etc. whenever Emily or someone else couldn't do it. I agreed, since it made my wife happy, and I understand the kind of situation Leslie is in. Helping has turned into Emily inviting Leslie and her kids over often, or organizing trips that they would like, such as camping or fishing. A few times my wife was unable to attend these get-togethers she organized due to work and insisted they still take place, leaving me to entertain Leslie and her kids on my own. Since I've known of Leslie my entire relationship with my wife, I didn't think too much about this. The times that it has been me left with her or sent in Emily's stead to shuttle Leslie around, I've made normal small talk with her and her kids. Recently, Leslie's kids were going to be away for a weekend, so Emily wanted to have Leslie over for dinner and some movies. She asked me to text Leslie to ask her over, and when I did, Leslie replied with, "Just as friends, right? I'm not interested in being anyone's girlfriend." I thought that response was out of left field, so I asked her why she would even say that, and her response was pretty much, "No guy would be asking me and my kids how we are doing or helping me out unless he wanted something in return." I told Leslie it was not anything like that, and then showed my wife the conversation and informed her that I'd be stepping back from helping her with anything involving Leslie and to leave me out of any future plans. I also offered to show her the rest of my phone and anything else. Emily believed me, but she still talked to Leslie about it to see what had given her that impression, and accordingly, she gave Emily the same answer. A few days later, Leslie apologized to Emily and told her that her emotions and mind were just all over because of a down day. That's fine, but I'm still not willing to help her or my wife out anymore as I had been, because I don't want any repeats or accusations hurled at me when I was helping as my wife asked. Emily thinks I'm overreacting and should just brush it off because it was just a silly miscommunication she had on a bad day. So Reddit, am I the jerk here? Additional info, the text I sent Leslie about the night was, Emily wants to know if you'd like to come over for dinner and some movies on Saturday. That is why her response was so out of left field. I sent the text because Emily was busy on her phone and wanted to know ASAP so we could make our weekend plans. Edit, thanks for all the comments and different perspectives. I'll talk to Emily tonight when we get home about the overhelping and what to do going forward. We are not swingers, by the way. Leslie knows my wife is completely monogamous, and while I'll be bringing up concerns she's helping too much, this level of help between the two of them has been present for as long as I've known my wife. And yeah, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP is being the a-hole here or not? And I would say OP is definitely not the a-hole here. He was maybe just being too nice. And the way he is acting now is completely valid in my opinion. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments, I'm very curious. A comment said, not the a-hole, but why is your wife so suddenly attached to this woman? If I were Leslie, I'd be wondering more if your wife wants a girlfriend than you. They've always been attached at the hip. When my wife had surgery for carpal tunnel, Leslie kept showing up even when I was home to take care of Emily and the house. And by the way, this is what OP responded. Add in that my own sister is similar with some of her close friends. I've never found their relationship strange, to be honest. Someone else asked, how long have you and your wife been acting as Leslie's chauffeurs and doing everything for her? What is Leslie's plan to get her own life back together? OP said, it's been about 4 months. Leslie is basically trying to save up to get a new used car or her current one fixed, as well as looking for a cheaper place to live. Info, does she have trauma in her background? This sounds more like someone who has learned people give nothing for free and has been betrayed or hurt in the past, no idea. NTA though. But only because Leslie did not apologize, and I don't think you're in the wrong for not helping her anymore. This is kind of a weird situation. Like, for example, if my friend asks me to go fishing with me and my kids and then sends her boyfriend slash fiance slash husband in her place, that's pretty weird too. If it was just an errand, that's one thing, but a whole ass fun trip is super weird. I just cancel the plans at this point. Also, was this fishing and camping trip just you, Leslie and her kids, or were there others involved? I can actually kind of get Leslie's side because this time you directly texted her from your phone, right? When your wife sets up these errands, playdates, I'm guessing she initially says it'll be her and then crap might come up, so maybe half the time she then tells Leslie that you're coming. So a direct text to Leslie from you asking to come over for movies kind of does feel pretty off. Also, you say, paraphrasing here, no guy would be asking me and my kids how we are doing or helping me out unless he wanted something in return, but I'm curious what actually the text messages say. OP responded, my wife made the camping trip, one of the fishing trips when my wife couldn't make it and we knew ahead of time. We discussed cancelling, she discussed it with Leslie and they both decided to go ahead with it. The other time, my wife organized us all going to do something together. She was with us for about an hour before she had to leave. I did directly text her from my phone, which I've had to do before. My text read like this: Emily wants to know if you'd like to come over for dinner and watch some movies on Saturday. I don't know about 100% of the time, but I've heard my wife tell Leslie that she'd be sending me in her stead on a number of occasions, so it's not as if Leslie did not have a heads up. Another person said, not the a-hole, did she apologize to you in addition to Emily? That's what kind of sets it off. She can have an off day and feel like maybe everyone has an ulterior motive and gets snappy, but like, yeah. She definitely needs to apologize to the person she hurt, in other words you. If you're worried she's going to like make a move on you and she's done more than this comment, that's different too. OP then said, no, she didn't apologize to me, only to Emily. And someone else said, not the a-hole, I think there's more of a miscommunication between your wife and her friend. When your wife cannot drive or entertain her friend, does she let her friend know you're taking her places or that she volunteered you herself? Or do you just show up? The friend might be confused in this situation. While I understand the single mother's frustration, she needs to figure this out for herself. She cannot nor should she depend on everyone else forever. Also, where are the kids' father in helping in their appointments? I don't know about each and every time, but I've been witness to my wife giving Leslie a heads up that I would be showing up instead. Such as one outing Emily planned, I suggested cancelling when Emily's schedule changed, but after Emily and Leslie discussed it, they decided to go ahead without Emily because Leslie's kids were looking forward to it. Another person said, not the a-hole, but forgive her and move on. People get silly notions and she's recently been abandoned, right? You've been very nice and she didn't understand that your wife was directing it. Update to the story, thanks for your input, there's been some good and not so good outcomes to this issue. My wife and I had a long conversation after I made my original post. I brought up points from both my perspective and possible points from Leslie's perspective that commentators made to explain the situation and why it made me uneasy enough to step back. I showed her the post and she eventually relented. Emily decided she would speak with Leslie again to see if her having to leave during a couple of outings or missing one had made Leslie uncomfortable. Despite Leslie agreeing ahead of time she was fine with Emily leaving and not showing up. We also discussed the matter of overhelping. In that regard, Emily wanted to keep helping her as she had been because that level of help is normal for them, but she would stop asking me to help when she couldn't. Instead, she said she would talk to Leslie about getting the kid's father to help out more now that her ex-fiancé was gone. She wound up agreeing that I should have received the apology, but since I'm just hands-off now, I didn't see the point in pursuing it. I'm happy to say that I've not been volunteered to help or drive since our talk. She continued to help Leslie as she was able for a couple of weeks until things took a negative turn. There were a couple of times neither my wife or Leslie's other friends were able to give her a ride or help her, and she asked Emily where I was that I couldn't do it. Emily said she told her it was best I didn't to avoid any future misunderstandings. After the fourth time Leslie asked my wife to have me drive her and pick up stuff for her when no one else could, Emily tells me that Leslie started in about how if what she said was not true, then I would not be avoiding her, but I'm acting as if I got rejected. According to Emily, Leslie started to draw parallels about how I went out of my way to do things for Emily right before we got together and started helping Leslie, so that was all the proof Emily should need about me having ulterior motives, and after that she says Leslie devolved into telling Emily that she'll wind up being left too. Ever since then, we have minimized contact with Leslie, and Emily told her she needs to do so unless Leslie seeks counseling for her breakup and stops having a negative outlook on the relationships around her, and then they can rebuild their friendship. That's been hard on Emily, so whenever I'm not working, I'm doing what I can to help her get through this. Thank you again, Reddit, for the fresh set of eyes. And the next one is a story from r/malicious compliance. This starts when my now wife and I decide to move in together and rent a house. We were in our early 20s and it was our first time renting, and we had fairly low income, so our options were limited. Luckily, we found a place that was in a less desirable area but had recently had some basic renovations. We signed a lease and life went on. Our first 12 months went by with a rental inspection from the agent every 3 months or so, never got any feedback, and being new to renting, figured everything was okay. We had a couple of items that needed repairing in that time, so I met the landlord and got his details for organizing repairs. He seemed like a decent guy, probably early 40s, reasonably handy, and he did some repairs himself. The first year went by, the lease came to an end, and they increased the price, and we signed on for another 12 months. But then it happened. About 2 months later, the agent came to inspect along with the landlord's wife. The wife turned her nose up at absolutely everything and made a number of insulting comments about our furniture when she thought I couldn't hear. We got an inspection report after that gave us a huge list of items to rectify and 2 weeks to do it, or else they would initiate proceedings to evict us. Naturally, after never hearing any feedback from any other inspections, we were simply shocked. The items were mostly minor nitpicks, with the worst things being to move our cats outdoors, clean the oven, and poison weeds on the path in the backyard. We were fine copping it on the chin and doing what they asked, except for the cats. Initially, when signing the lease, it said no pets, but we requested and got acceptance for our indoor-only cats. It was noted on the lease, but not on the copy I had. I was kicking myself for not having it in writing, and I knew I had no chance if they wanted to push the point. So then I called the landlord rather than talking through the agent. He explained that tenants in the other house they owned had been using it as a drug lab and the agents had never picked up on it. So then when they found out, his wife insisted on going along to our inspection, and hence why we got a bad report. I talked it out with him, and although he was very patronizing towards me, he agreed we could keep the cats inside as long as we kept everything clean, and the next reports went fine. So we did as they asked, and they increased the inspections from once every 3 months to once a month, which is the minimum period they are allowed. We had a list of things to fix after every inspection. It made our life hell. We felt like intruders in our own home, we grew to hate living there, and it put a strain on our relationship. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, my father passed away around that time, so I ended up with inheritance money from his super fund and the sale of his house. My wife and I used the inheritance as a deposit to buy a house of our own, sorted out a loan agreement, and found a place we liked. Now, this is where I finally got my chance to repay them for making us feel like indentured servants that only existed to vacuum carpets and scrub walls in our home. By some miracle of luck, I negotiated the settlement date for our new house to be 1 week before our lease was due to end. This meant that we shouldn't have to break contract and be stuck footing the bill while they found new tenants. Better yet, they sent me a letter saying our lease was due and included a new lease agreement with a large jump in rent. The letter said that we had to either sign the new lease and send it back to them by a date that was 2 weeks before end of lease, or consider the contract ended, move out by the end of the lease term, and hand over the keys. It said nothing about telling them that we didn't want to renew the lease, so I didn't. I did not want them booking open inspections and intrude further on our lives to show the place to new tenants and decide that they didn't deserve extra notice. The days ticked by, a couple weeks went past, and my wife and I were busy getting ready to move. I did not get contacted by the agent again until my phone rang 1 week after the new paperwork was due, literally the day before we were moving out. It was the agent, of course. They greeted me nicely and said it was just a reminder that we needed to sign the new lease and get it back to them. I told them, oh, we are not signing it. We bought a house and we are moving out tomorrow. The other end of the line went dead silent for a good few seconds while my face got stuck in a grin. The agent quietly asked why we hadn't told them, and I said the paperwork only said to let them know if we were extending the lease, nothing about moving out, so I assumed they knew. She said goodbye pretty quickly, and the panic in her voice was glorious. She was screwed and knew it. I wish I got to hear more of the fallout, but my wife and I moved out, cleaned the house over the remaining week, and I handed the keys over. They never booked any open inspections in that final week, so the house sat empty for a while, waiting on new tenants, and the landlords missed out on some rent payments. We also checked the listings and saw they advertised it at a lower price than what they were going to gauge us for. As a bonus, a couple days after the lease ended, the agent called me and said our contact stated that we had to have the carpets steam cleaned and they were going to take the cost from our bond. I told her we had had them steam cleaned and she said we didn't. The carpet smelled like garbage. After me telling her again that we had, she demanded a copy of the receipt. I emailed it through and never heard from them again. I didn't mention that there was a cavity under the house and the couple of bags of rubbish I chucked under there as we were moving out because the bins were full. I guess the floor was not as airtight. And here, Ripe Stars, please let me know in the comments what you would have done if you would have been in this situation with these awful landlords. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.